So the GA645 is meant to be a blend for medium format and everyday use. It gives a larger negative for a photographer who might want it, while also giving you the creature comforts of a point and shoot that we all know and love. But really, there are three things that will probably keep most people from ever picking one of these up. And that's why this week I wanted to give you those and tell you a little bit about this before you go and try and picking one up yourself, and maybe giving you just a little bit more information on something you may not have known before. But before I do, let's talk about some of the things I personally fell in love with when it comes to the 645 and the Zi version. Now, the first one that I bring up is comfortability. And again, I want to stress this is one of the most comfortable cameras I have ever used. Because it is a medium format camera, you get more resolution than a 35mm camera, but it also gives you the ability to carry that resolution in a package that is less than 15 pounds. And when you tie that with ergonomics of the body, mixed of plastic and titanium parts, you get a body that is light enough that it feels nice to carry, but it's also not hefty, which is, again, a really good benefit when you're talking about form factor and the way something feels in the hand, especially when we're talking about a camera. But if comfort didn't grab you, I think ease of use will, because this particular camera comes with priority and program modes that make it essentially a medium format point and shoot style camera. And if you're like me and appreciate not having to worry about ISO, shutter speed, and aperture all the time, and it takes that thought process out of something that can be daunting in a lot of ways when you're in specific situations, I find it to be one of the most beneficial parts of this camera because you can really focus on your composition. You can focus on your environment to really get the best image and not, again, have to worry about ISO, shutter speed, aperture all the time. It, of course, has the manual operations if you want that, if you want to switch into that. But I think for me, the priority modes and the program modes specifically are what make this camera this camera. It really is the charm, in my opinion. And though this part of the video might not be the most robust or have the most verbiage, I think that's because particularly this camera speaks for itself in those manners, and these features speak for themselves. Because inevitably, you understand that you can turn off that part of your brain and really just focus on what you want to focus on. And for me, I think that's where the allure lies with a camera like this. But I did say we talk about the drawbacks, because I think, in my opinion, they are just as important, maybe even more so than the pros of this camera, and what actually make you determine whether you're going to purchase it or maybe not. The first one that I have is talking about the autofocus. Now, in order to understand this, I think we first have to talk about the way that this camera actually collects focus. It does it in one of two methods, either by actively or passively collecting focus. Those terms are straight out of the manual from the manufacturer directly. And in order to explain this a little bit better, I drug up a couple of old manuals to really help with the explainer portion of this. But really, active is an IR-based system, meaning infrared. It's essentially a triangulation of a beam from the front of the camera to the subject and back, and from there it determines where it's needing to focus. On the other side, you have passive focusing, which the manual indicates is a contrast-based focusing, indicating that it is judging the scene of the actual photo or the scene that it's provided, judging contrast by ambient light, and then collecting focus that way. And one of the most important things that I think is that this camera uses both methods interchangeably in order to use its strengths of both systems, it says, based on the manual at least, to give you the best possible chance at focus for your subjects. But herein lies my particular problem with this typical focusing system. In that, I think it does really great with the passive system because that kicks in at about 10 feet or so to infinity. And really, this particular camera, and maybe it's just my model, but from what I've seen in other people's, but when it comes to taking portraits or candids or whatever, with nearby subjects, that's when you're going to run into a problem. And for me, that's a huge deal breaker with a particular camera. And then when you consider this with the fact that this is a rangefinder style camera where what you see is not through the lens but through the viewfinder, you end up trying to guess at what it's actually collecting focus on based on a meter of distance inside the viewfinder. It does have a locking feature where it will actually show you based on the box in the viewfinder whether it is collected focus as it says. But what you won't be able to tell is necessarily where it is other than by general distance, which of course is in meters. And the second thing that I find so detrimental to this particular setup is the center weighted meter. Now, if you ever have taken out an older camera and had to take an external meter, you can understand how great it is to have an onboard exposure meter or a meter to give you the proper exposure for your image. That alone is a feature that we appreciate in newer cameras that are not in older cameras. And when you take it at face value, that's great. However, this particular meter is center weighted, meaning that instead of something like evaluative, which we might see in more modern cameras, instead of it taking a zone or an average of an entire image, it weights the center so heavily that you will detriment the rest of the image depending on how contrasty or how much range you have in that particular scene. The best example I have of this is this building that I took downtown in Charlotte. And realistically, the problem here is that the building is set up against a white sky because of the day. It actually underexposes the rest of the bottom of the image purely because it's not rating for that, because it's center weighted. It isn't considering that nearly as much. And the fact that you can't change that or adjust that is a deal breaker for me. Now, you can arguably make the argument that you can use the manual adjustment features to combat some of this. But again, in my opinion, when it comes to a point and shoot kind of camera, that's what I want out of it. And inevitably, if I can't adjust that based on the scene, it's a deal breaker for me. And 3 is probably the most important when it comes to judging whether someone is going to purchase this camera or not, probably even more so than anything else that I've talked about. Because I think this specific feature of this particular camera will keep even the most interested probably from buying one. And that's because it's costly. Realistically, it doesn't matter how convenient or how awesome a camera is if it is priced outside of most of the market. When you think about the cost of this particular camera, you have to understand that even if it is great, even if all of the things that I have mentioned are problems weren't problems, it's still so inaccessible based on cost alone on the secondary market. So for me, I think this is probably the largest drawback, but I'll let you be the deciding factor on that one at least. But with all that, I have to say that those are the reasons why I just can't keep this particular camera, even though I fell in love with so many different features that we talked about. For me, when it comes to the cost, the autofocus, and a metering system that I can't necessarily trust with everything that I want to shoot, it's just not for me. But maybe it's for you. It really depends on the kind of work that you do, how quickly you need to do it, all of those things. Do you appreciate portability and versatility over consistency potentially? And maybe the argument. Maybe it's not. Maybe you can let me know down in the comments down below if you've ever used this camera and have different situations that you like it for, or if you've never used this camera and those bring up questions that you can bring to me. I would love to talk to you guys down in the comments. Don't forget also, while you're down there, hit up the description because the usual social links for Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter are there as per usual. And I'd love to talk to you there. Beyond that, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button because it helps the channel and it tells me what you guys actually like, and maybe we can make more of that. But inevitably, I just want to say thank you for checking this one out. Thanks for sticking around all the way to this point. And I'll see you guys as per usual, as always, in the next one.